You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God. We are The Breakfast Club. We got some special guests in the building, the home team, Kenny Burns and Miss Fawn Weaver.
Yeah.
That's right, the lifestyle specialist, Kenny Burns.
Hello, family.
Hello. Before we get started, can you tell the people what it is that you do?
I am the plug, the ultimate plug. I've been curating culture for about 20 years. I started the influencer programs, which led me to this partnership that all spirit companies use. And, you know my history with Puff. I think, well, you do clearly, because when you started on Revolt, we were launching Revolt.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, took him to the next level, launching Deleon Tequila. Apple Ciroc was my launch. So, you know, I've had some real skin in the game on the spirit side.
You and Puff didn't get along at one point, though, right? It was like a dark skin, light skin thing.
Yeah, it's always a light skin, dark. No, absolutely the truth. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Puff is a racist. No, I'm joking.
Really?
No. I'm joking. No, Puff is the coolest. Obviously, one of the fearless leaders of our culture, and we just, you know, we butt heads because we're both strong Scorpios.
Is it something in the club? Puff was hosting the club.
You don't remember that video?
Kenny Burns
Kenny had the bottle of Grey Goose.
Had a bottle of Grey Goose.
Nah, you know what it was? Like Puff, you know, Puff is into this whole weed thing now, right? But even then it started. So he's expecting everybody to be Ciroc because it's a black thing. You know, he owns it. He's the, you know, leader of the culture, quote unquote, at the time. And, you know, they were cutting a nice check, and I just wanted to show my power. He happened to come to my market. You know, it was a whole thing. It's
this
like,
was in Atlanta.
Yeah, and he's my big brother. So at the end of the day, you always want to show what you can do as well. So that's all.
Did he get upset about that, though?
Yeah, back in the day,
Absolutely, he got upset.
That was the fighting Puff days.
Puff would fight. Absolutely. No, he got very upset. I mean, rightfully so. I had a billboard in front of Justin's like, "Hey, welcome to this." And then the club, you know, the compound was my home.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like strategically placing booths and things of that nature to make sure I won.
Well, Puff has changed a lot, and so have you, Kenny.
Yeah, no, Puff's
From the
amazing,
beginning
and
of
the
your career.
maturation and the growth is exceptional. And you know, people know what Puff was prior to me coming, you know, to the team, and the love, you know, the amplification of family. I like to believe that, you know, I kind of, you know, inspired that along with the rest of his team, just to, you know, to be who he's supposed to be for the culture, because he's so important to the culture.
Right.
No matter all the things that people say and see, if Puff wasn't in pocket, a lot of jobs would not be here for us in the culture.
That's true.
Without Puff, we wouldn't have had certain like opportunities, and it's a fact. So people like Puff, people like Jay, we got to hold them in high regard and protect them.
How'd you meet Puff?
I was 16 years old from Washington, D.C. He went to Howard,
yeah.
and I was a young hustler, and, you know, trying to be around Howard University was the thing to do. And we went.
So neither one of y'all was really in school, but y'all.
Yeah, he was definitely
Well, he
at
was
Howard
16.
doing all the. I was 16. I was in high school, and he had this Pele jacket on, half white, half black, the Doc Martin joints, and he just looked like the videos. You know what I'm talking about? I was like, oh, I need to know that guy. And you know, we were running to each other time to time, and he respected my crew and how we moved around, and we became cool. Yeah.
Did you know Craig Mack? Because I know you heard the
Man, God
unfortunate
rest
news.
the dead, man. Like I did the first Big Mac experience in college in Atlanta, and that's when I first met Craig. And you know, I met Big before that, but yeah, it's, you know, it's a testament of time, man. You know, time is not friendly. It waits on no one. It keeps moving.
He was only 46 though.
Bro, that's what I'm saying. And it was heart failure. Like how does
He had a broken heart because nobody was talking about him before he died. Like he had a bunch of birthdays, nobody was posting his pictures, so he died of a broken heart.
Damn, Charlamagne.
That's the truth.
No,
We need to
I
start
believe,
celebrating our people
you
when they're
know,
here.
and I was there when we did the Bad Boy tour, and was there when Puff was trying to get him on tour, and it was like, you know, he was just in his beliefs and in his ways. I wish
for the
he
last
would.
Bad Boy tour?
Yes.
Okay,
See, I told you
Yes.
it's not that Puff didn't invite him. He was too deeply religious, and he was
Yeah,
cut
he was.
himself off.
It was all about that. And the bottom line is, I wish he would have got that love. Because I was talking to Fawn about it yesterday, and we were talking about the tour, and he was fighting me. He didn't really want to do that per se initially.
He didn't want to do the tour first?
Well, you remember he was doing all those records, and he had Meek, and it wasn't, you know, Puff Daddy. I'm like, yo, they want to celebrate you in the history of Bad Boy. And he did it. And I just wish Craig could have felt that, because it was so much genuine love. Like, you know, like when you grow up with something and you can't replace. That's like Anita Baker going on tour right now. Like,
Right.
I gotta see Anita Baker.
And
'cause my
she is
mom
on tour
played her.
right now.
That's what I'm saying.
Shout out to my girl.
Yeah, like I
99.
gotta see her. I damn near
She's
want to wear
going
roller skates. Like,
Wait, so are you going to go see
I'm
Anita
definitely
Baker?
going to
Yes.
see Anita. I'm
Okay.
actually trying to meet Natina
In
and Robin
Miami.
in Miami.
Isn't that the problem with the culture, though? We treat our culture like it's so disposable.
No, and that's the bad thing, and that's one of the reasons I jumped back into spirits after I left, Puff, is because, we do things for so many people so much, and you give your all, your creativity, your time, you don't get the credit. You don't get the up and pay. You don't get things, right? How many things you went through to get where you at? How many things have we all gone through? And with Uncle Nearest, it's like, for me, it was like reparations on a whole nother level, right?
But let's talk about it from the beginning, because
Yeah.
this is the whiskey brand.
Yes, this is the
All right,
whiskey
so
brand.
talk
Do you
about
own
how-
And this is I own equity in it.
Okay, all right.
Round of
That's all
applause
right,
for
all right,
Fawn
all right,
Weaver and
all
Keith
right,
Weaver
all right,
for
all
recognizing a young player.
All right.
Absolutely.
But yes.
Tell
and
us
so,
about the brand.
Please, Fawn Weaver, ladies and
Fawn.
gentlemen. Yeah.
Hello, Fawn.
Hi, Charlamagne. So I'm the co-founder, but I really go by chief historian because that's what I do most of the time. So the brand is named after the first African-American master distiller on record in the United States. It is the first time, even though we helped to build the American whiskey industry, it is the first time an African-American has been recognized. 100%. And it is the first time that a bottle has been named in honor of an African-American. So that's a big deal. But the story in 2 minutes, is in around 1820 in Maryland, and a slave was born. And we don't know what happened between that time and the time we see him in a city called Lynchburg, Tennessee, around the mid-1850s. And he's the head distiller at this farm for a preacher and a distiller. And this guy has to make a decision. Do I continue to be in the whiskey business? And my church is telling me you have to choose. You have to be a preacher, you have to be a distiller. And so he chose being a preacher. But he still wanted to make money. So he allowed the still to be run solely by an African-American man. That did not happen. There was always a white boss. And on this one, he allowed that. Now, allow is very flexible, seeing as how Nearest was still a slave at that time. And so around the middle of the 1850s, a young kid comes who lost his mother at 4 months old, a white kid, and he shows up and he's a chore boy. He is not a privileged kid. He is not someone who is higher than Nearest. And fast forward, he wants to learn the whiskey business. And Nearest takes him under his wing and begins to teach this young white kid how to do whiskey his way. And so
And who was that kid, Fawn?
Hey, stop. And essentially the only difference between bourbon, which most people know, and Tennessee whiskey is the process that Nearest taught. So Nearest's whiskey was the best in the land because of a process that more likely than not came from West Africa, which is a filtering through charcoal, through sugar maple charcoal. And so once it goes through there, it just makes a superior whiskey. So time goes on, and this African-American man becomes the first master distiller for this young white boy as he grows up. And the young white boy goes on to be known around the world, but his master distiller story is lost in time. And I think that's just the history of African Americans overall.
Yeah, we do all the work, and white man gets the credit for it.
Well,
Steals the credit for it.
Well, in this case, no credit was stolen. I can confirm that because every single day, a day doesn't go by where I am not on the phone, on text, on email with Nearest's family. And the thing that they are very clear about is Nearest's name was not forgotten because of that white young boy who everyone else now knows to be Jack Daniel. His real name is Jasper Newton Daniel. In Lynchburg, we all call him Uncle Jack. But his family is very clear in wanting to make sure that in this process of honoring Nearest, that we do not forget that Jack honored Nearest when he was alive.
He was a slave. I guess he was a good
Hey,
slave master.
He was not Jack's
He was
slave.
not Jack's slave.
Jack
worked
Jack
with him.
was a
Chore
Jack
boy.
was a chore boy. So he was running after hogs. He was milking cows. He was going to get water. The kid was not privileged. So if you're the 10th child and you lose your mother at 4 months old, in those days, men didn't know how to raise kids.
Gotcha.
And so he's having to raise himself, and then he loses his father when he's 15. So then he's an orphan. So this is not a kid who grew up not understanding difficulty, but who he found comfort in, as you will, as a teacher, as a mentor, just happened to be African American.
Wow.
So it's one of those great stories that out of the ugliest time in American history arises a beautiful story. And we've not seen something like this ever.
So he paid
Ever.
homage to him throughout his career.
Not only did he pay homage to him throughout his career, so Jack Daniel's Legacy, his official biography, which I have the rights to, and just republished. And I republished it because Nearest and his boys are mentioned in Jack's biography 50 times.
It's a book?
Yeah,
Wow.
it is his official biography. And so every person who was interviewed to really lay out his biography was Jack's family, were his employees, were all those who were closest to him. So to have Nearest's family mentioned almost more than anybody else in the book means they wanted to make sure his legacy was not forgotten.
You know what's so crazy about whiskey? I always look at whiskey as some white boy drink.
And that's because if you look at the demographic, so even for us, our target demographic for Uncle Nearest is an African Americans, which is crazy if you think about it. But what I love about that is for African Americans with brands, they're always trying to push at us and they're trying to market to us in a specific way. With Uncle Nearest, it's one of those things that we just are. And so we're not trying to market to us. It just is a brand that we can be incredibly proud of. And up until now, whiskey has kind of been a white man's drink.
So why-
But I
Yeah,
think that
until
we're
now.
going to-
Yeah, 'cause
until
stay
now.
tuned.
If you was trying to market to black people, you'd call it Jamal Daniels.
Why whiskey of all things? What got you into whiskey and doing this homework?
Well, number one, that is my drink of choice, and
always
I
been.
drink it
Neat.
neat, and I drink it overproof.
God
That
damn,
is
you a
always-
gangster.
No, she's
that-
no.
that-
You just gonna find
You a
out how
gangster.
gangster she is.
You watch Coyote Ugly, oh.
No. Ask her, Charlamagne. Ask her who owns the property that the kids grew up on. That it's this house.
Who
on
owns the
thing.
property
Yeah,
that the
ask
kids
her.
grew
Tell
up
her-
on?
tell the story.
So the home, the 313-acre property where Nearest taught Jack, where the original Jack Daniel distillery was until at least 81, but probably closer to 84, where anything that was bottled prior to that time, the water is still running through that property. I own it.
You bought it.
Go ahead,
Wow.
There
Fawn.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So it is one of those things where it is, he's funny. He calls it reparations because he's like, finally, an African American is
but
going in
really?
and saying, listen, we are going to do this and we are going to do this right. But honestly and truly, and I say this all the time, and he and I have this conversation all the time, I truly believe it is Nearest and Jack in heaven saying it is time for this story to be told, but it's got to be told right.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to cut you, but so the family, people always ask, like, well, what are you doing for the family? Like, how's it set up? Like, what's going on? Not only is she in their lives tremendously, but the Nearest Green Foundation.
Yeah,
Right?
it's the Nearest Green Foundation, and so they're going to be watching this. So hey, fam, so everybody say hello to Nearest's fam.
Hey,
because I can
Nearest's
tell
family.
you,
What's up, cuz?
What's happening?
What's up, bro?
they will
Sis?
all be watching this when it comes on tomorrow because they love this show, number one. But it is the Nearest Green Foundation. One of the things we wanted to make sure in doing this is that it wasn't just honoring Nearest, which was what they wanted. So what was important to them, what is important to him, is that when we die, his name is not forgotten.
Right.
And so I am out every single day telling this story because I promised them that before I die, I will make sure that his name is known around the world. And so I push incredibly hard, and they support me so much because of that. But to me, it was more than just honoring him. That was their request, and they would have been fine if that was all that we did. But we started 12 different projects, all to honor him simultaneously. And so that would take forever and ever. But if anybody's interested, it's nearestgreen.org, and all the different projects are on there. But the main project that I'm so excited about, that Kenny is talking about, is that we wanted to change the trajectory of an entire bloodline. And we thought, gosh, if we can do that, then all of them will go back into the community and they'll raise somebody else out of it. So Nearest has 7 children, 7 descendants that are currently in college, and we pay for all of them.
Oh.
It's a full
Full
ride.
ride.
And
their
we
masters.
We have one that is graduating in May that is going on for her master's. So I'll be at a graduation in May, and it's the first one that we're seeing graduate. So I'm super excited. But there was one kid, and he's going to be watching this. So Matthew, this is you. There was one kid who we were concerned about his ability to keep his grades up, because going into it, he couldn't really get into college on his grades. He got in because he was a football player, and he's a big guy. And they're like, but you got to make the minimum GPA. And he hadn't going into it. So he was going to pretty much be on probation going in. But they were going to let him play football. And he and we talked very briefly, but he understood through this story that he comes from a lineage of excellence, that his ancestors' legacy of excellence requires that he do more, that he become greater. And he went into college and he said, you know what? I'm going to redshirt. I'm not even going to play football because you're giving me the opportunity to live up to my ancestors' legacy. I'm going to do it. And after the semester ended, his grandmother, who calls me Niecy, she calls and she says, Niecy, Matthew's got something to say to you. And he gets on the phone. Bottom line, kid got a 4.0.
Wow.
Nice.
4.0.
Nice.
And so there is something about understanding that when we come from a legacy of excellence and we can achieve greatness, we strive for something more.
Well, that's the whole beauty of teaching kids African-American history before slavery.
Yes.
Connect them to Africa. Let them know
Yes.
that we were kings and queens at one point. That's why people love Black Panther so much.
Listen, we bought out 6 screens. Every place where Nearest's family is, so Houston, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Nashville, and Tullahoma. Every single place where his family is, we bought out screens so that they could take disadvantaged youth. So the pictures, they're texting me and all this, and all of them are kind of doing this. And but we sent, I think we paid for maybe about 800 kids to go. But at the beginning of the films, Nearest's family got up and said, we want you to know you're here because of the Nearest Green Foundation and our ancestors' legacy of excellence. Those kids needed to see that realness coming from Africa, which is obviously where Nearest came from, but to see that legacy can still be achieved here in the United States.
Now, Fawn, how did you get so interested in this story? How did you even know about it?
Because she's a best-selling author. You didn't know that part.
Yeah, I'm about to count your pockets
That's
in a
why.
minute.
Yeah,
Fawn. So get your answers ready,
I'm just
just in case the
wondering, was it
IRS
a
watching.
I
I
dig
want to
it.
know where this money
Listen,
coming
I
from.
pay my
God.
taxes. I
Okay.
pay my taxes. I've been an entrepreneur for 23 years, and you better believe I pay my taxes.
Was it a situation where you were already a fan of whiskey and you said, let me research this? Or was it a story that you came across and said, or did you know somebody in the family?
So I'm going to give you 2 answers on that. The easy answer is I was in Singapore on business. And I was
Why you say on business like that?
Yeah. Because Charlamagne was
Yo, she
teasing.
watched him
Charlamagne
this
was
morning.
teasing.
Like I'm gonna figure out. 'Cause
I love watching him spar, because when I was telling Kenny this, I said, what I love about Charlamagne is I can't wait to see him in 20 years because he has this enormous power that he doesn't yet know he has. And so I like watching you because you know you have a certain level of power, but I see your power in 20 years and it excites me. But
That's
back
the reason
to-
we're gonna change his
back
name
to-
today. It's no
No.
longer Charlamagne the God.
Yeah.
What's your new name?
Leonard McKelvey.
Come on, step into your truth, man.
He has
Step into your truth,
He
man.
has a powerful mouth.
He has a powerful mouth.
Take it.
Listen,
Take it there.
Show him the power of that mouth, bro.
I mean, there most of the world are born followers. There's only a few that are born leaders, and you're one. So I like watching you for that.
Well, thank you, Fawn.
But no, absolutely.
She's
so
funny.
to answer your question,
She's the Fawn effect.
The Fawn effect. That's what his wife calls me, the Fawn effect. So to answer your question, I was watching the New York Times. I was looking at the New York Times, and it was actually on the cover of the international edition. But everything in the story lacked proof. It was more sort of conjecture. It was like, well, even the descendant that was interviewed didn't know how he was related. So it was sort of this story has been passed down from generation to generation, but it's never been proven. Well, if the story is not proven, it's never going to be truly recognized or honored, and no one was putting in the time in order to make sure that it was proven. And so I start reading this and I look at it and say, I think that there's a story here. I don't know what the story is, but I think there's a story here. So I start diving into it from the story side of it. And fast forward, getting into Lynchburg to go interview the descendant that was in there, we end up running into Jack's eldest descendant. And she begins sharing information with regard to Jack's family and Nearest's family. She's the one who told us the farm was for sale.
Didn't realize what she was really doing. She done bought up half of Lynchburg, y'all. The dream is real.
and so she started telling us about that. And once I really dove into it and understood that story from not just Nearest's family's perspective, but Jack's family's perspective, and understanding how the two families grew up side by side, it was a remarkable story. So I knew the story needed to be told. I knew that there was a movie that could be made on this. So that's what I was looking at. But then one of Jack's other descendants, and he had no children, so all of his descendants are through marriage. Mm-hmm. And one of his other descendants was a head of whiskey operations for Jack Daniels, 31 years in the business, and she retired. And when we were working on this and working on with the family, the book side of it and the movie side of it, and she says, if you guys ever decide to do a bottle, I will come out of retirement because this is worth it. You got Jack's family saying, I will come out of retirement for this. And so I met with the family and said, what is the one thing you think should be done to truly honor Nearest's legacy? And they believe that his name should be on a bottle. So I left that time with them and called her and I said, I don't know anything about how to start a whiskey company.
Where is Kenny?
I know exactly who to call.
Well, but what I
That's
did,
another crazy story,
right?
Yeah.
But I told her, if you will come out of retirement to do this, I will raise the money. I know how to raise money. And I knew it was going to cost a lot of money to be able to pull this off. And that's how Kenny actually comes into the picture.
How much did you raise? How much did you
Don't
raise?
you worry about that, Envy. It's a pretty penny.
No,
We're opening a new distillery. We're opening a new distillery in Tennessee. No, I just want to.
A lot. You have to.
A whole lot.
For this, you have to.
A whole lot. And my friends were doing the raise, and that's how we connected. But the crazy thing is, we do this all the time. Like, we take these brands, and it's a cookie cutter. You remember when I used to do the videos in the club with the sparklers? That was early. Like, then everybody does it. And what's special about it, right? But then the legacy piece was always missing. I couldn't date nothing back with MHUSA. I couldn't date nothing back with Bacardi. And it didn't mean anything. Mm-hmm. And in my 40-something year, you know, it has to mean something. Mm-hmm. It has to mean something because it's business, right? Everybody do business. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? And you're going to do business, and there's going to be things that might not be good for people sometimes, or people shouldn't OD with. But my point is, when something can mean something to someone in a generation of people, I mean, the fact that they have 7 children in college, right? This is before the big marketing schemes and all the beautiful and wonderful things we'll do. You have 7 kids in college. The goals are keep it 3.0 and bring somebody else along after you've achieved your success. That means something. And so when I was introduced to Fawn, you know, literally a week later we were together. I'm walking these hollow grounds, right? I'm on the 330-something acres. I'm going through. I'm seeing all these gangster moves she did. I mean, she not only. I'm not going to go all the way in, but she buys the acreage, right? The original house. Then she gets another significant property. Then there's an equestrian park down the street. I don't know how many 100 acres that, but it's the way that she's moving and the respect that she's moving with. I mean, Jack Daniels loves her. Mm-hmm.
He's still alive?
No, Jack Daniels, the company.
The company. Oh, okay.
The company has brought her in because she's a historian and has done research that no one has been able to do. They bring her in. They fly. And it's amazing. You know us. First thing we do, like, I ain't tripping on, man. Listen, everybody who drank Jack Daniels now needs to drink Uncle Nearest. We're not saying that.
No.
Because Jack was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jack was great.
To Nathan Green, right? But the thing about it is, man, it's so much substance to it, and I just had to be a part of it.
Did Jack Daniels trickle any money down to the Nearest family?
They were the richest in the community as far as blacks went.
So at Nearest, immediately following the Civil War, was the wealthiest African American in the area. He didn't even live near any African Americans, ironically. Everybody to every side of him was white. But the crazy part is he had more in his personal estate than a lot of the white people did.
And acreage back then.
We have to remember it's a place called Lynchburg, Tennessee, right? And so there's a picture out there that people often misidentify as Nearest, and it's the only known picture of Jack Daniel with his crew. And he's sitting in a white hat, and there's an African American to the right of him, and no one knew who that was. And then I brought Nearest's great-granddaughter to Jack Daniels. They allowed us to come in and do a private tour for her and drove her up to the top of the distillery because all that land is where she grew up.
Wow.
And she says to them, she said, so somebody tells me that you have a picture of my granddaddy somewhere on this property. Take me to it. I'll tell you if it's him. And we go into what was Jack Daniels' office, and the picture is up on the wall, and she's in a wheelchair, and she says, Fawn, push me closer. And I push her closer, and she looks up and she says, yep, that's Daddy George. That's Nearest's son who raised her. And so you're looking at this, and she begins telling these stories about Nearest's family. So her Daddy George, she talked about he'd throw all these big parties, and it was something that he was known for in the community. And she says, and yeah, his white sharecroppers would do all the work.
And that's another thing too, and I want to say this. The story of Uncle Nearest is not a super divided story.
No.
It's not a super blacks got treated so bad, right?
No.
The community in which they live, and of course things happen. That was the era, that was the norm, right? Yeah. But the story in which was going to make an incredible movie is that this was a very close-knit community that really loved each other. You know, and it's amazing to hear stories like this because these aren't the stories we hear from that era.
Right.
Yeah, especially when the name of the town is Lynchburg.
Lynchburg.
Right.
Come on.
Because I thought it was Virginia at first because that's the only Lynchburg I ever heard of until.
And to be clear, they were lynching as many whites as they were lynching blacks.
Yeah, that
so
was
it was
the
a
thing.
different. Yeah, it was a
Really?
different kind of
Lynching.
Yeah, if you did something and people thought you were guilty, they would lynch you. But it was one of the few places. Like there was a newspaper article that went across the country in 1903, I think, because a black was in jail. And historically in the South, blacks would go in jail. They would never see their trial because a mob would come and pull them out and hang them, right? They would come out and lynch them. Well, this mob from outside of Lynchburg shows up at the jail. The white sheriff comes out and starts blasting on them.
Like kills two of them.
Kills some of the mob and starts arresting people. This is to protect a black guy that's in jail. So this is a different kind of story. And I knew it was a different kind of story because one of the first things I did when I got to Lynchburg is brought together all of the African-American elders. So that's people that are 70 years up and up.
Real elders.
And I asked them, I said, growing up here, when I talk about race, what would you say positive to negative percentages? Would you say it was like 60-40, 70-30, 80-20? Every single one said 90-10. 90 positive. You do not find that in the South very often. So, but I believe the reason why that existed is because you've got this little bitty 5'2" white guy who's the big distiller in town who was always flanked by Nearest's family. It's hard to be racist when the big guy in town does not see color.
Wow.
You better say that. You've been doing radio before and stuff.
Where you get all this money from, though? You say you started off as an entrepreneur 23 years ago. What you start off doing?
Sorry, I just have to tell y'all who her daddy is.
Frank Wilson.
But that is not
Frank
where my
Wilson,
money came
musician.
from. You got to
just
stop
wanna
it.
talk about
You
your
gotta
daddy.
stop
Now,
it. But
we got to talk about your
I
dad.
Daddy, are you
like-
kidding?
Motown
Listen,
legend,
listen.
right?
That's important.
Producer.
Listen, it is the reason, and this is a part, something that I love from this story that I learned when I was doing research. The New York Times actually pulled it out, and I didn't even know this. The reason my father ended up with Berry Gordy at Motown and was one of the original hit makers there for Hitsville, USA, was because he got kicked out of Southern for participating in a sit-in. And the Civil Rights Organization gave every person who got kicked out a one-way trip, a ticket to anywhere in the country. And he chose Los Angeles because he wanted to start making music.
Wow.
And Berry Gordy learned of his music and said, I want to bring you out to Detroit.
It's in her bloodline, y'all.
Yeah, she just ducking this money question.
It's in her bloodline, y'all.
So I will say this is that one thing is my husband and I have been making moves for about 15 years solid. He's an executive vice president for Sony Pictures, and we don't spend a lot of money, and we don't care about money, but what we do care about is investing it. And so we do a lot of investing because we don't do a whole lot of spending. So you don't see any fancy, watches or earrings or necklaces.
Leave that up to me.
I leave it up to him.
I'll take care of that.
If you come, like no fancy cars, no fancy houses or any of that kind of stuff. Everything we do is investment. So I think we approach things a little differently. I think that for African Americans in general, if we put most of our money into investing, everybody could do what we're doing. I really do. Yeah. So we don't have a whole lot of
Most people ain't gonna do the
disposable
research though.
They will
100%.
not.
They know they're not gonna do that homework to
100%.
do that research.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just love to hear stories like this
Absolutely.
though, because we always see the success stories of the entertainers and the athletes. You know, we don't hear about people like you yourself. You know, so that's why I like.
Or people like Nearest
That's why I like
as
for people
well.
to talk about.
Or
their
people
pockets.
like Nearest that are all about leaving a legacy of excellence. And I tell people with this brand that the one thing I want it to do is to outlive me. That's what's most important to me, is that it outlives me.
And it's on the market now. They can pick it up now.
It is on the market now. It's in 12 states. It comes to New York in about 4 weeks.
Okay.
But it's in 12 states. We'll be in 42 before the end of the year, and we'll be in 3
Go
countries.
ahead, Kenny. How much you got? How much equity?
Oh, you know, I'm a partner. Partner. I'm a partner. All those who didn't give me partnerships before. Partner.
All right.
I'll get out,
Wait, and
I'll
Ken-
get out of the frame.
But
on
no,
that.
Kenny, I see you also have a movie coming out as
There
well.
you go. There you
yes.
Answer this, it's not because we grew up in Brooklyn together when we was 19.
With Will Packer?
Yeah, so Fight Night with Will Packer, it's a 1971 period piece. It was the biggest heist in Georgia history. At the helm of the entire thing was a man named Chicken Man, which drew me to the story, and a cop named J.D. Hudson, the first black detective in Atlanta. And this, this heist, man, I love gangster flicks. Everybody, I'm sorry, you guys might know, but I gave Damon Dash the movie Paid in Full. Like I've always been.
What you mean you gave him the movie?
I introduced him to AZ when I had an office on 23rd Street.
Yeah, phrase that right, because Dame will be like, he ain't
Oh,
give,
no, he
he
knows.
ain't give me nothing.
No, absolutely, 1,000%. Dame Dash, he knows. So
You
basically,
gave it to him?
I introduced him to AZ, the real AZ, Wood Harris's character. Took him down, met the entire crew. They gave him some money, acquired the script. All I asked was for a part in the movie. I never got it.
But ain't Dame from
Why
Harlem?
didn't you get the part in the movie?
No, I never was in
That's
the
why you
movie.
got to get stuff in writing, Kenny. Fawn would tell
That's
you.
why Will
Get
Packer.
it in writing.
Will
Get it
Packer.
in
Oh, we
writing.
definitely got
And
this in
know
writing.
your worth. That's right.
Exactly, but Will Packer, he came to the to the table right.
Now, how did this part not happen in Paid in Full? You didn't.
No,
do it.
I was a child. I mean, I'm running, I'm hustling, I'm trying to figure my life out. It was no blueprint. No one taught me the game. I have no father figure.
AZ from Harlem? Ain't AZ from Harlem?
AZ is from
And
Harlem.
Dame from Harlem?
Dame's from Harlem.
So a DC person introduced a Harlem person?
I am the plug. I keep trying to tell everybody.
I'm going to be honest with you, Kenny. I don't know about this story. I got to hear Dame's side.
Fact check. Fact check. You want
Dame, I need to hear your side, Dame.
fact check. But anyway, so that was my first offering. But when I launched Revolt Television with Puff, I wanted to bring the content that I had. And then we never got around to it with Puff. And then when I was leaving, I was on a plane with Will Packer. And I was like, look, there's this story from Atlanta. Will's synonymous with Atlanta as well. I was like, we have to do this story. Plane ride, 4 hours. We in first class together. We get home. His car's not there. We talk. I take him, use my car to take him home. So we were like, kind of, okay, yeah, he wants to do this.
You trapped him.
Yes,
Definitely trapped him.
definitely. Then Mike Epps. In my eyes, I was trying to bring. I don't know the film game. I'm just trying to attach talent, make this thing, whatever. So besides securing the life rights with Jeff Keaton, I got Mike Epps. We had this whole series of conversations. It took 6 months to get Will and them to buy all the way in. It took 2 weeks for Universal to say we're doing the deal. So we're in script phase right now. We'll be in pre-production, top of the year, and production next year. So
Congratulations,
Thank
Fawn.
you, man. Thank
Fawn,
you.
I just want to tell you that he knows your husband works for Sony Pictures. He didn't bring this idea to you. I just want to throw that out.
I never knew that. I never knew that.
I
I never knew that.
My goodness.
But it doesn't hurt.
All
Keith
love.
is the man.
All
Big shout to
heat,
Keith.
all love. Big shot to Keith.
Yeah.
All
All right.
love.
And
Well,
Kenny
thank
has
you,
his
guys.
podcast too as well, so make sure you check
Yes,
that out.
Baller
Also,
Alert
Baller
Show.
Alert.
Kenny got a lot going on.
I just, I'm out here for
Kenny's
the culture,
actually a
for
great
real.
personality on when he does like radio and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Like,
Kenny did radio. Me and Kenny
don't
almost
care
did radio
about that
together at
Yeah,
one point.
me and Charlamagne
He definitely
almost did
did.
radio
Yeah.
together. But I love y'all. I'm proud of y'all.
Proud of you,
And keep
Kenny.
going.
Proud of you.
Keep
and you're
going,
doing
y'all.
something in Anguilla in May, right?
Yeah, we're doing Thrillin' and Anguilla part 2. So
You and D Nice.
me and D Nice, the legendary, one of my favorite DJs. So yeah, looking
Well,
forward
thank
to it.
you, Kenny.
Thank y'all. Man.
And we need more of this
Appreciate
for the
y'all.
crib, man. One bottle ain't gonna
Yeah,
be.
and we actually have a silver. We actually have a silver whiskey, and I'll send you guys
Please.
all a personal package with some BRNS gear.
All right. Well, there you have it. It's Kenny Burns.
And Fawn, thank you so much. It was great for you to come through. Great to hear that story. We can't wait to see more about it. See the movie.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
the book. She's writing a book.
I am.
She's writing a book.
And Kenny, let me hold something.
Yeah,
Kenny
so
got some
God
bread.
is
Let me hold
good.
some
Come
bread,
on,
man. Let me hold some
come
bread.
on. Hello.
All right. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.